There's a blood pressure pattern that doctors find particularly concerning, and it doesn't happen during the day. It happens while you sleep, or more precisely, just before you wake up. In the early morning hours, the body begins preparing to start the day. Stress hormones rise. The nervous system shifts into a higher gear, and for a significant number of older adults, blood pressure begins climbing before their eyes even open. By the time they reach for that monitor on the nightstand, the numbers they see aren't their resting pressure. They're already the result of a surge that began hours earlier. That surge has a name. Doctors call it the morning blood pressure rise. And what most people don't realize is that what you do, or don't do, in the hour before bed may quietly influence how dramatic that rise becomes. Before we go further, this video is educational and not a substitute for your doctor's guidance. If you're on blood pressure medication, please continue taking it as prescribed and discuss any changes with your physician. Now, here's the part that may surprise you. If you've been following the old advice to stop drinking any fluids after 7 or 8 in the evening to avoid nighttime bathroom trips, that habit might seem harmless. It sounds practical. It sounds sensible. But for some older adults, going into sleep in a mildly dehydrated state may be doing something quiet and unhelpful to blood vessel behavior overnight. Here's a simple way to understand why. Blood vessels aren't passive tubes. They're active tissue. They tighten and relax in response to dozens of signals: hydration levels, stress hormones, nervous system activity, mineral balance. When the body senses even mild fluid loss, it may respond by narrowing blood vessels slightly, trying to maintain pressure throughout the circulatory system. That response can persist through the night. So the morning surge doesn't just start when your alarm goes off. It may have a running start. This doesn't mean drinking large amounts before bed. That would simply trade one problem for another. The idea is more specific than that, and more useful. Imagine someone in their late 60s who has been careful about their health for years. They take their medications, they watch their salt intake, they try to walk most mornings. But their blood pressure readings first thing in the morning have always been higher than their afternoon numbers, and they've never quite understood why. Their doctor calls it normal variation, which is true. But what no one has ever mentioned is that the 90 minutes before they fall asleep might actually be a window, a small but meaningful window, to support a calmer overnight pattern. That window is what we're talking about today. The drink at the center of this isn't exotic or expensive. It's a warm, unsweetened herbal tea, consumed in a small amount, roughly 6 to 8 ounces, about 45 minutes to an hour before sleep. The two options with the most interesting research behind them are hibiscus and chamomile, and they work through different but complementary pathways. Let's start with hibiscus, because it has a surprisingly strong body of evidence for something you can brew in a mug. Hibiscus tea is made from the dried calyxes of the hibiscus flower, and it contains compounds called anthocyanins and other organic acids that may help relax the smooth muscle tissue lining blood vessel walls. When those muscles relax, vessels dilate slightly. Resistance in the circulatory system decreases, and blood pressure may soften as a result. Several studies have looked at regular hibiscus tea consumption and its relationship to blood pressure in adults with mild to moderate hypertension. The results have generally been modest, but consistently in a favorable direction. Not dramatic, not a replacement for medication, but meaningful enough that many cardiologists consider it a reasonable complementary support. The key word is regular. This isn't about one cup working overnight like a switch. It's about a nightly ritual that may contribute to a steadier baseline over time. Now here's something that catches most people off guard. Chamomile, which most people think of purely as a sleep aid, may also offer a secondary benefit for blood pressure. not through direct vessel relaxation, but through its effect on the nervous system. Chamomile contains a compound called apigenin, which binds to certain receptors in the brain associated with calming activity. When the nervous system is less activated going into sleep, the body may produce lower levels of the stress hormones that drive blood vessel tightening through the night. In other words, chamomile may help address one of the root causes of that early morning pressure rise, a nervous system that never fully settles during sleep. If you're wondering whether you should choose one or the other, there's no reason you can't use both. Some people find a simple chamomile hibiscus blend ideal. The chamomile contributes to a calmer nervous system. The hibiscus brings its vessel-relaxing properties. Together, they work on two different aspects of the same overnight pattern. Now, let's address the concern that's probably already forming in your mind. Won't drinking something before bed mean waking up in the middle of the night? This is a fair question, and the answer is, a small serving, 6 to 8 ounces, is generally well tolerated by most people without causing nighttime disruption. 6 to 8 ounces is roughly a standard tea mug, not a large glass. The body can comfortably process that volume without triggering a bathroom trip at 3 a.m. for most adults. If you know you're particularly sensitive, you can experiment with 4 to 6 ounces. The timing matters too. That 45-minute window before bed, rather than right at bedtime, gives your body a head start. What you want to avoid is the other extreme, reaching for a full glass of water right at the moment you turn out the light, or having a large cup immediately before lying down. A modest, intentionally timed serving is the principle here. Here's where many people also make a quiet mistake without realizing it. They try a herbal tea routine for a few nights, don't see a dramatic change on the monitor, and abandon it. But blood vessel tone isn't something that shifts overnight in response to one cup of anything. What builds over days and weeks is a slightly calmer baseline, a body that enters sleep in a marginally better state, that experiences a marginally less dramatic pressure surge through the night, that accumulates those small differences into something measurable over time. If you've ever felt discouraged that lifestyle changes don't produce instant results, that frustration makes complete sense. But the body tends to reward consistency more than intensity. One more thing worth knowing. Magnesium, which many older adults are mildly deficient in, plays a direct role in blood vessel relaxation. Some herbal teas contain small amounts of naturally occurring magnesium, and pairing your nightly tea habit with a magnesium-rich evening snack, such as a small handful of pumpkin seeds, a few almonds, or even a piece of dark chocolate, may add another layer of support to the same overnight goal. This isn't required, but for those who find their morning numbers still running higher than they'd like, it's a practical addition worth considering and discussing with a physician. Coming back to that person in their late 60s, the careful one, the one doing most things right but still puzzled by the morning readings. What they may never have been told is that the body has rhythms, and those rhythms can be influenced gently. The goal isn't to override the cardiovascular system with a tea. The goal is to give the body slightly better conditions to regulate itself through the night. A calmer nervous system going into sleep. Blood vessels that aren't starting from a tighter baseline. A morning rise that begins from a lower starting point. That's a meaningful shift. Not because any single cup of tea is powerful, but because the overnight hours are long, and small differences in what the body is doing during those hours can accumulate quietly into something you actually notice on the monitor. You've been checking that morning number for a reason. You understand that the early hours matter. And now you have a simple, low-risk, medically grounded way to approach that window a little more thoughtfully. Warm, unsweetened, small serving, 45 minutes before bed, consistently. That's it. That's the practice. If this gave you something useful to think about, consider subscribing for more videos like this. And if you have a morning blood pressure story, or if you've already tried herbal tea before bed, share it in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needed to read today.